In Oregon for a while, you probably have an idea that our state's history is literally rooted in racism. Before it became a state, the government of Oregon Territory passed what were called black exclusion laws. Black people were not allowed to settle in the territory or own any property. Those laws became part of the state's constitution when Oregon became a state in 1859. Voters eventually repealed those laws in 1926, 67 years later. By then, the Ku Klux Klan was booming in Oregon. Oregon actually had the largest KKK membership per capita in the entire country, and they helped to get racist politicians elected, including Governor Walter M. Pierce in 1922. And like a lot of cities across the country, Portland was also no stranger to redlining. Banks denied mortgages to people of color in certain areas, creating segregated neighborhoods. This map shows how Portland was divided in 1940. The red areas were labeled hazardous because of, quote, undesirable populations. The federal government banned this practice in the 1970s after the civil rights movement, but the effects of it are still doing resounding harm to this day.